evening one and all. Shri Swami Shikshan Prasarak Mandals, Shri Kumarswami College Ausa welcomes all the honorable dignitaries and participants for the national webinar on the topic Afghanistan Past, Present and Future. The college has been conducting a chain of webinars. The purpose of webinar series is to exchange knowledge, spread knowledge and enrich knowledge, and this webinar series is going smoothly and continuously because of the efforts and tenacity of the chief organizer and chairperson of this webinar series, Honorable Principal Dr. M. Ambedkar sir. I heartily welcome him for this webinar as a chairperson. I am very happy to welcome today's honorable keynote speaker and resource person, Dr. Anjali Sehrawat ma'am, Assistant Professor from Sushant University, Gurgaon, Haryana. Once again, I welcome ma'am for this national webinar as an invited speaker. I also welcome all honorable organizing committee members, Vice Principal SD Misal sir, Ravindra Karanje sir, Praveen Utge sir, IQAC Coordinator Dr. Sanjay Kare sir, Dr. Anita Dole ma'am, Dr. Patwari sir, Dr. Sudhir Garad sir, Dr. Ambadas Khillari sir, and Dr. Wadkar sir. Honorable ma'am is going to elaborate the topic about the condition of Afghanistan, and we all are very eager to listen this speech. But before that, I would like to invite Dr. Anita Dhole ma'am to introduce today's chief guest and keynote speaker. Ma'am, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. You are welcome to this grand national and international webinar series organized by Shri Kumarswami Mahavidyalaya Ausa. Firstly, I am very thankful to respected Principal and Chief Organizer Dr. Ambedkar MM for giving me an opportunity to introduce resource person on this virtual platform. My special thanks goes to all the respected organizing committee members, IQAC coordinator and staff members. Those are supporting like backbone of this series, and a big thanks to all the respected participants who are joining daily very regularly from all over India and abroad also, and they are making this series a very successful series. So it's my pleasure. I am here to introduce today's keynote speaker. Today's keynote speaker is Honorable Dr. Anjali Sehrawat, Assistant Professor, Sushant University from Haryana. Title of speech is Afghanistan, Past, Present and Future. Her educational qualification is BA Honours in Political Science, MA Political Science, MPhil at School of International Studies. She also completed PhD from JNU. She is NET qualified in 2010. She has 9 years of teaching and industry experience. She also Cultured Committee of School of Law, Darpan. As the coordinator of the committee, she has immensely facilitated students to commence various programs for the disadvantaged and underprivileged, making them more solicitous about the welfare of society. She worked for almost 4 years as a senior researcher for the Cotter Unified Imaging Project funded by the Cotter Foundation in association with the University of Exeter, UK. She has presented a paper at a prestigious platform like American Association of Geographer, USA. She has consistently presented paper in esteemed universities like Jamia, Millia, Islamia, JNU and DU. She has also worked on a United Nations project in the capacity of a consultant, researcher, socio-economic impact study of COVID-19 UN Women India in the year 2020. So after this introduction, I request today's keynote speaker, Honorable Dr. Anjali ma'am, start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anita, for this warm introduction. Thank you, Dr. Bedkar, for the kind, invitation which you've extended to me. And as Dr. Anita has already, introduced, that I will be talking about Afghanistan past and present, and also the future. I would also make, certain, I would say that, some statements which may suggest that something is going to happen in Afghanistan soon, something good or bad. Let's understand the country first. So it's for us to understand any particular country, it's very important to know the past. And as you know that it's a very small country on the world map, but still we see that there's a lot of geostrategical importance attached or given to the country. So I will present my screen to all of you.
Visible, madam.
Thank you so much for acknowledging, sir. So as you know, I was just now mentioning that it's a country in the Asian region, and despite the fact that it's so small in territory and not so very resourceful in terms of oil and all, but then other resources it may have, like opium and all, but then it has always remained as a very important country to all the great powers of the world. So I will give you a brief history, especially I'm going to elaborate just on the 20th century part, more or less, because that gives us the background of building up of this entire Taliban movement, which happened, to have caused this entire turmoil, and also participation, or rather the interference by US in the name of humanitarian intervention. So as you can see that there are neighboring states, and then we also see that India's Pakistan occupied Kashmir is also touching upon Afghanistan, and you can see the neighboring states here. So we can see the important provinces as well in Afghanistan in this particular map. We see Kabul, as the heart of Afghanistan, Kandahar, and then various other small provinces, Mazar-e Sharif, And if I, talk about Afghanistan's topography, so it has, a rugged topography, and it's a mountainous country, and it has, diversity in terms of ethnicity, religious, and tribal groups. Approximately, the population is around 48 millions, and the largest ethnic group is Pashtuns, followed by Tajiks, and these are followed by Hazaras, Uzbeks, Emak, and there are, as you can see, that there are different ethnic groups. So in a way, they have actually, prevented Afghanistan from forming a consensual and coherent sense of nationalism. Based rivalries combined with open and varied interpretations of Islam created fractious cultures. As we all know that Islam has been very important in this country, and there has been a constant fear in the international society's mind as well, that it may fall as a prey to this land for terrorism and also for Islam Caliphate. So, but that is why a lot of these countries, in the name of waging a war against terrorism, is trying to control things in Afghanistan. As the past also suggests that there have been various international terrorist organizations who have taken a shed, or probably who have actually grown in this particular region, and there is always an interference by Western countries and countries bordering Afghanistan, which has resulted into the fragmentation of Afghan polity. So then there are Sunni, Islam fraction, and then that belongs to Hanafi Islam Law School. Then there are 10 to 15% are followers of Shia Islam in the country, and then we also have a minority which includes Sikhism and Hinduism. So as I was telling you, that we are going to briefly understand that what exactly happened in the country in the 20th century and even prior to that. So if I briefly talk about the historical timeline, we see that Muhammad Ghazni, an 11th century conqueror, created an empire from Iran to India, and he's considered as the greatest of Afghanistan's conquerors. Genghis Khan took over the territory only in the 13th century, but it wasn't until the 1700s that the area was united as a single country. By 1870, after the area had been invaded by various Arab conquerors, Islam had taken root. Then during the 19th century, Britain, looking to protect its Indian empire from Russia, attempted to annex Afghanistan, resulting in a series of British-Afghanistan wars. So there have been 3 famous British-Afghanistan wars, and the last one actually, helped Afghanistan attain independence. So historically, we see that Afghanistan has always been at the strategic location and at the crossroads of Asia, which has made country a focal point of many imperialist nations or ambitions. So about its history, the country has been subject to recurrent invasions and outside occupation since the beginning of the 1820s, even till the 1919, till the time it attained its independence. It was the unfortunate victim of the competing imperialist ambitions of Great Britain and Tsarist Russia during that time. So as we know that time was different, and the Great Britain was conquering the world that time, and Tsarist Russia also happened to be the neighbor of Afghanistan. So this particular country acted as a buffer state against Russian expansionism. The British invaded and occupied Afghanistan for almost close to a century before finally being driven out in 1919 with the Third Afghan War. So Afghanistan became an independent nation in the year 1919. The King Amanadullah declares Afghanistan a monarchy rather than an emirate and proclaims himself king. He launches a series of modernization plans and attempts to limit the power of the Loya Jirga, which is the parliament of the country. So in 1929, the king abdicates because of the internal disturbances happening in the country, and then some minorities or some ethnic groups rather trying to control the situation and trying to take over. He has to leave the country. In 1933, Zahir Shah becomes king and rules for the next 40 years. And then in 1934, we see that US has formally recognized Afghanistan. So as I was telling you that Afghanistan became an independent nation in the year 1919, but then the country has always seen some civil unrest, and despite the fact that a ruler could actually rule for 40 years, but then the country never saw stability internally. So that is the reason that Afghanistan has fallen behind the rest of the world. Despite the fact that it attained its independence in the year 1919, and Amanullah Khan also began with a rigorous campaign of socio-economic reforms. But then the country, in terms, if we compare it with countries who attained independence around the same time, we do not see much prosperity in that country because of the internal turmoil or civil unrest or disturbances which kept happening inside the country. So Amanullah, we declared it a monarchy, and he himself, proclaimed himself as a king. He even launched a series of modernization plans and attempted, as I told you, to limit the power of Parliament, the National Council. So there were various critics who were frustrated by his policies, and they took up arms in 1928, and by 1929, the king is abdicated. After a rebellion by some Pashtun tribesmen and Tajik forces of Kalkani against him, and Nadir Khan was also exiled due to disagreements with King Amanullah. So, as Shah of Afghanistan, Nadir Khan quickly abolished most of Amanullah's Khan reforms. The next person who took over, he happened to be a relative of Amanullah only, and when the situation worsened in Afghanistan, so Nadir Khan came and captured the entire movement, and then he became the leader of the country, and he abolished most of Amanullah Khan's reforms, which were directing towards socio-economic progression of the country. So he tried to rebuild an army that had just been engaged in suppressing the rebellion. The forces remained weak while the religious and tribal leaders in the country grew strong. So as Nadir Shah, had to struggle with the other group who had actually overthrown Amanullah, that group was also trying to destabilize Nadir Shah's government. So there has always been this constant struggle for holding the throne of the country. So Zahir Shah, the son of Muhammad Nadir Shah, he was a senior member of Muhammadadi royal family, and also commander-in-chief of the Afghan army for former King Amanullah Khan. So then Zahir Shah becomes the king in 1933, and the new king brings a semblance of stability to the country, and he rules for the next 40 years. He was the last king of Afghanistan, reigning from 8 November 1933 until he was deposed on July 17, 1973. So serving for 40 years, Zahir was the longest serving ruler of Afghanistan since the foundation of the empire in the 18th century, the Durrani Empire. He expanded Afghanistan's diplomatic relations with many countries, including both sides of Cold War. He tried to extend his friendship towards America as well as Russia. In the 1950s, he also began modernizing the country. He, culminated in the creation of new constitution and a constitutional monarchy system. So there have been glimpses of women wearing, skirts and going to for university education. In the media, you must have seen that Afghanistan was never what it is today, at least in the early 20th century. So we have seen leaders in Afghanistan, who have actually given or had a vision of educating women, opening the university education for them. So it was not that for the women of the country then. So when in 1973, when Zahir Shah was undergoing a medical treatment in Italy, his regime was overthrown by a coup by his own cousin and former Prime Minister Muhammad Daud Khan, who established a single-party republic, ending more than 225 years of continuous monarchical government. He remained in exile near Rome until 2002. Who remained in exile? So it was Zahir Shah who remained in exile. He returned to Afghanistan after the end of Taliban government, who was given the title of, he's also given the title of Father of the Nation, which he held until his death in 2007. So we see that not only during 19th century or 20th century, we have seen that Afghanistan has been an unfortunate victim of the competing ambitions of the great powers, be it Britain or Russia, or be it during Cold War, be it between America and Russia. So how this entire struggle started. So we're going to come upon that part. So for us to understand that how from a monarchical system, it came to a position where there were coups, where there was no stable government, despite the fact that after seeing a stable government for 40 years, but then thereafter there was never stability seen in the country. So that is the time, wherein we need to, invest our minds that why this thing happened in that particular country. Did it become the pawn in the hands of these great powers? So what exactly happened during that time? So let's just try to understand that once for us to understand the present situation of the country. I hope I'm audible to all. Please somebody confirm.
Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, as I told you that when pro-Soviet General Muhammad Daud Khan, the cousin of the king, becomes the prime minister. Earlier he was the prime minister. Much later he, led a coup in the country and then thereafter ruled the country. But then he was the prime minister. He was, looking to the communist nation for economic and military assistance. He also introduced a number of social reforms, including allowing women a more public presence. So that is the year of 1950s when, Muhammad Daud Khan was also taking some progressive steps, wherein he was talking about women and their presence and their education. So in 1956, it was Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev who agreed to help Afghanistan, and the two countries became close allies. Then around the same time, as part of Daud's reforms, women were allowed to attend university and enter the workforce. And 1965 में जो है Afghan Community Party secretly forms. The group's principal leaders are Babrak Karmal and Nur Mohammad Taraki. So in 1973, as I just now mentioned, when king was overthrown, the last king Muhammad Zahir Shah, in a military coup, and that his regime, the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, now comes to power. Khan abolishes the monarchy and names himself as the president. The Republic of Afghanistan is established with very strong ties to the USSR, because he was getting all the support from USSR. So certainly we could see that as coming that the government, the present government established then, will have close ties with USSR. So the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan renamed the Republic of Afghanistan in 1986. It was the Afghan state during the one-party rule of People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan from 1978 to 1992. So PDPA came to power through the SAR revolution. SAR revolution, I'm going to tell you briefly about SAR revolution. So PDPA, that is the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, came to power through the SAR revolution, which ousted the regime of the unelected autocrat Muhammad Daud Khan. So now what was happening? Now who came to power? The PDPA came to power through the SAR revolution, and they had ousted the regime of the unelected autocrat Muhammad Daud Khan, who had actually overthrown the previous ruler, who had actually done a coup in the country and declared himself the president. So Daud was succeeded by Noor Muhammad Taraki as the head of the state and government on 30 April 1978. So now Taraki and Hafizullah Amin, the organizer of the SAR revolution, they introduced several contentious reforms during their rule, such as land and marriage reform. They also added on the reforms introduced by Daud, such as universal education, equal rights for women. Soon after taking power, a power struggle began between Khalq Taraki and Amin and the Parcham faction led by Babrak Karmal. So then you see that there is another struggle for power happening. So there is no stability in the country. So Khalqis won and the Parchamites were purged from the party. The most prominent Parcham leaders were exiled to the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union. So SAR revolution, and also sometimes known as SOR revolution or the April revolution or April coup, was the process by which People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan overthrew Daud Khan, and who himself had declared himself the president of the country, and he was ruling as an autocrat with one party system in the country. So in this particular incident, Daud Khan and most of his family were killed at the presidential palace by military officers in support of PDPA. So this particular revolution resulted in the creation of Soviet-aligned government with Noor Muhammad Taraki as president. SOR or SOR is basically the Dari Persian name of the second month of solar Hijri calendar, the month in which the uprising took place. So this revolution actually was ordered by Hafizullah Amin, who became a significant figure in the revolutionary government at a press conference in New York in June 1978. Amin claimed that the event was not a coup but a revolution by the will of the people. So whatever name you give it, you call it a revolution, you call it a people's revolution, you call it a coup. But then we see that eventually this government also did not last. So the coup involved heavy fighting and resulted in as many as 2,000 deaths, both military and as well as civilian. So this particular revolution had a very deep impact in Afghanistan's history, marking the onset of 43 years of conflict in the country, rather more. So I am counting it less, rather much more. So now the struggle continues. So this continued struggle which we see even today, that is why we are even studying about this country. So 75, 77, the new government proposes a new constitution, which we've already discussed. Khan had discussed, talked about women's rights and all. So as I was telling you that he was killed in a communist coup, and in 1979, what actually happens that American ambassador Adolph Dubs is killed. So US cuts off its assistance to Afghanistan, and there is a power struggle between Taraki and Deputy Prime Minister Amin. Taraki is killed on September 14 in a confrontation with Amin supporters. Now, USSR invades Afghanistan on December 24. So this is the year which marks the invasion and beginning of the collapse of Afghanistan. So the USSR invades Afghanistan on December 24 to bolster the faltering communist regime. So now on December 27, Amin and many of his followers are also executed in the country. Now Deputy Prime Minister Karmal becomes the Prime Minister, and there is opposition to Karmal, and the Soviets spawns violent public demonstrations. So by early 1980, the Mujahideen's rebels have united against Soviet invaders and the USSR backed Afghan army. So now you see that there are two sides. One supported by Soviet, and then the other which we are calling as Mujahideens, who were rebelling against the Soviet invaders and the USSR backed Afghan army. So this continuous struggle, who actually are these Mujahideen rebels? Who are they fueled by? Who's giving them the support to actually go and fight against their own country's army and Soviet invaders? So we are going to definitely learn about it. So when we progress chronologically, so due to this ongoing turmoil, we see that a lot of Afghan people, almost 2.88 million Afghan people, have fled from the war to Pakistan, and another 1.5 million have fled to Iran. And Afghan guerrillas gain control of rural areas and Soviet troops hold urban areas. So it's a very clear distinction here that Afghan rural guerrillas or Mujahideens are controlling the rural areas and Soviet troops are holding the urban areas. So now Osama bin Laden also comes into picture. Although he claims to have traveled to Afghanistan immediately after the Soviet invasion, Saudi Islamist Osama bin Laden makes his first documented trip to Afghanistan to aid Soviet fighters, anti-Soviet fighters. So it was in the year 1984 we hear about him. He traveling to first documented trip to Afghanistan he makes to do what? To aid anti-Soviet fighters. And why is it even happening? Why is there so much of interference? Because of the ongoing Cold War, wherein both the superpowers are wanting to have their presence. So one side is being supported by the Soviet troops or the Soviet funds, and the other one is getting the aid from the US. So in United Nations also intervenes. They investigate and report human rights violations happening in Afghanistan, and then 1986, Mujahideens are receiving arms from United States, Britain, China via Pakistan. So you see similar situation happening right now in Ukraine also. So hope Ukraine doesn't meet the same fate, but then obviously Ukraine can't be compared to Afghanistan. But then you see when the bigger states or the great powers meddle in the affairs of the smaller states, so they leave them in a condition of turmoil. So United Nations investigates reported human rights violations in Afghanistan, and Mujahideen keeps receiving arms from US, Britain and China via Pakistan. In 1988, Osama bin Laden and 15 other Islamists from the group Al-Qaeda or the base to continue their jihad. They are there to continue their jihad or holy war against the Soviets and other who they say oppose their goal of a pure nation governed by Islam, with their belief that the Soviets' faltering war in Afghanistan was directly attributable to their fighting. They claim victory in their first battle, but also begin to shift their focus to America, saying the remaining superpower is the main obstacle to the establishment of a state based on Islam. So now you see that it's taking another color. Now they're talking about the establishment of a state based on Islam. And earlier they were there to support, anti-Soviet जो वहाँ पर wing था to fight against Soviet troops. So in 1989, we see that US, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Soviet Union, they signed peace accords in Geneva guaranteeing Afghan independence and withdrawal of 1 lakh troops, Soviet troops in the country. And that is the time when there were a lot of internal developments in Soviet Russia also. They were going through, civil unrest in their own country. There was perestroika, there was glasnost, and then these policies, and then there was disintegration also happening in the country around the same time. So that is the time when they decide that we are going to withdraw our troops from this particular country, and wherein they sign a peace accord with, say, other countries, and they agree that we are going to withdraw our troops now. So that 1989. So it's not only that they agreed because of only external pressure, but there were internal pressure from Soviet Russia itself. So they eventually had to leave the country. So following Soviet withdrawal, the Mujahideens continued their resistance against the Soviet-backed regime of the communist president Dr. Muhammad Najibullah, who had been elected president of the puppet Soviet state in 1986. So now the country, Soviet troops have left, but the Mujahideens in the country who were already having a dominance in the rural area were not wanting the government to continue because they felt that the elected president was a puppet in the hand of Soviet state and they did not want him to continue. So Afghan guerrilla named Sibatullah Mujahidi as the head of their exile government. They named him as the head of their exile government. And in 1992, we see that the Mujahideens and other rebel groups, in the aid of turncoat government troops, stormed the capital Kabul and oust Najibullah from the power. Ahmad Shah Massoud, legendary guerrilla leader, leads the troops into the capital. The United Nations offers protection to Najibullah, and Mujahideen, a group already beginning to fracture as warlords, fight over the future of Afghanistan. They form a largely Islamic state with Professor Rabbani as the president. So we now see another change in the government. The previous communist-supported government is overthrown, and the Mujahideens and the rebel groups, led by Burhanuddin Rabbani, takes over as the president of the country. So in 1995, there is newly formed Islamic militia, the Taliban, rises to power on promises of peace. So most Afghans who are exhausted by years of drought, famine and war approve of the Taliban for upholding traditional Islamic values. The Taliban outlaw cultivation of poppies for the opium trade, crack down on crime and curtail the education and employment of women. So now women are required to be fully veiled and not allowed outside alone. Islamic law is enforced via public executions and amputations. The US refuses to recognize the authority of the Taliban. So both sides, US and Soviet Union, they left for their own good. They kept supporting the group which they had wanted. But now we see that the country is in big turmoil. There is a Islamic militia, the Taliban, which has come to power. Even though you don't recognize the authority of the Taliban, but it is very much ruling the country, and they are having their own rules and regulations. Now women are also have to abide by the rules which they have for them in the country. They have to be fully veiled. They are not allowed to go outside home alone, and they were also executed or sometimes pelted with stones publicly for the moral crimes which they commit. So then this period continues for a certain time, and then there is continuous devastation of farmers, and rural areas become inhabitable. So more than 1 million Afghans flee to neighboring Pakistan, where they languish in refugee camps. And in 1997, Taliban publicly executes Najibullah. Ethnic groups, in the north under Massoud's Northern Alliance, and south, aided in part by Hamid Karzai, continue to battle the Taliban for control of the country. But with no respite, they don't get the control. In 1998, Al-Qaeda's bombing of 2 American embassies happened in Africa, and President Clinton, that time the president of US, orders cruise missile attacks against bin Laden's training camps in Afghanistan. The attacks missed the Saudi and other leaders of the terrorist group. So by 2000, we see that an international terrorist, bin Laden, is widely believed to be hiding in Afghanistan, where he is cultivating thousands of followers in terrorist training camps. The US demands that bin Laden be extradited to stand trial for the embassy bombings, but Taliban declines it. They refuse to hand him over to US, and United Nations punishes Afghanistan with sanctions restricting trade and economic development, but there is no respite. They continue to pop up and then to have terrorist group training camps in their own country, and refuse to admit it. at the international level. So in March 2001, sorry, ignoring international protests, the Taliban carry out their threat to destroy Buddhist statues in Bamiyan, Afghanistan, saying that they are affront to Islam. So we still have those glimpses. Those who have seen that in media, or probably you've seen that in some tech documentary. So wherein Taliban is carrying out the destruction of Buddhist statue in Afghanistan. So that also invited a lot of international criticism. Then a month after arresting them, the Taliban, Taliban arrested some people for spreading Christianity, and they, it's considered to be punishable by death. So they put 8 international aid workers on trial for spreading Christianity. So why am I even talking about these small instances, or rather not that small, but you see that they were inviting international criticism from every corner. So now we talk about the turning point, or rather wherein each and every person on the world got to know that what exactly is happening, because they did Afghanistan's name was attached to something which is of worldwide importance, and also which cannot be forgotten in the history of the world. So in September 11, 2001, there were hijackers who hijacked 4 commercial planes in US and crashed them into World Trade Center towers in New York, Pentagon outside Washington DC, and Pennsylvania, killing thousands and thousands of people. So days later, US officials said that it is Bin Laden, the Saudi exile, who they believe that he was hiding in Afghanistan, is the prime suspect in the attacks. So that is how this this entire chapterization starts, wherein from pre-2001, wherein we are more talking about the internal turmoil, wherein we are focusing on more on no government surviving more than few years. So from there we see that there is lot of international attention in this country. September 11, 2001, each and every person in the world probably knows where exactly is Afghanistan, what exactly is happening inside Afghanistan, because there's so much written about Afghanistan in the international media. So following unanswered demands that the Taliban turn over Bin Laden, US and British forces launched airstrikes targets in Afghanistan. So this is how the invasion started. This is how this humanitarian intervention started, or what should I say, that interference in the name of humanitarian intervention. So we will have that 5-minute discussion towards the end when we close this discussion. So following unanswered demands that the Taliban turn over Bin Laden, US and British forces launch airstrike against targets in Afghanistan. American warplanes start to bomb Taliban targets and bases reportedly belonging to the Al-Qaeda network. The Taliban proclaim they are ready for jihad. So now, after weeks of intense fighting with Taliban troops, the Northern Alliance enters Kabul. The retreating Taliban flee southward toward Kandahar. So it was only after 9/11 we see that the US-led American invasion toppled the Taliban government and assisted the government of President Hamid Karzai in establishing the writ of law, as well as rebuilding key infrastructure in the nation. Thus, US initiated retaliatory attacks following the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, which marks the 3rd period of imposed invasion and occupation upon the country. So, as we have a paucity of time, I will quickly come to the part wherein we talk about Taliban's collapse. So, somewhere close to December 2001, some people call it as the collapse of Taliban, which they definitely came back with a bang. But then the end of Taliban regime is generally tied to this date. So when the Taliban surrendered Kandahar and Taliban leader Mullah Omar fled the city, leaving it under tribal law administered by Pashtun leaders. Despite the official fall of the Taliban, however, Al-Qaeda leaders continue to hide out in the mountains. The lawyer Jirka or Grand Council elects youth-backed Hamid Karzai as interim leader, who later on even became the president when the parliamentary elections happened. And he served as an interim president until 2004, when the government was required to organize elections. Now, due to increased violence, NATO takes over security in Kabul in August, and the effort is the Securities Organization first ever commitment outside of Europe. So, in 2004, the lawyer Jirga adopts a new constitution following input from nearly 5 lakh Afghans, some of whom participated in public meetings in villages. Now, the new constitution called for a president, 2 vice presidents, but the office of prime minister is removed at the last minute. And then official languages remain Pashto and Dari, and also the new constitution calls for the equality for women. Then more than 6 million Afghans turn out to vote for Jirga, that is the Council of People, and the Mishrano Jirga, that is the Council of Elders and local councils. So considered the most democratic elections ever in Afghanistan, nearly half those casting ballots were women. So they were viewed as political progress in a highly patriarchal and conservative society. So 2005 marks the year wherein the first parliamentary elections took place in more than 30 years, and the peaceful vote led to the formation of Parliament's first meeting in December. So now there is as you see that even though there is invasion which has happened, NATO forces are already trying to expand its peacekeeping cooperation in the country, but still we see that Osama bin Laden remains hidden, remains untamed. So what happens around 2011? So I'm going to quickly come up to that part because as I told you that we have paucity of time. So in 2011, so US forces overtake a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, and killed Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden on May 2. So the death of America's primary target for a war that started 10 years ago fuels the long simmering debate about continuing of the Afghanistan war. So everyone thought that the Afghanistan war is over. Now US will withdraw its troops. So it was very clear on everyone's mind, but that did not happen. So what was the plan? So President Obama, he prepared to announce the withdrawal of some or all of the 30,000 surge troops in July in the same year. And he also said that we are going to prepare a blueprint wherein we are going to withdraw the troops. So Afghanistan President Hamid Karzai reiterates that international forces should focus their military efforts across the border in Pakistan. Now in December 5, 2011, Bonn conference happens again. Important countries meet in Germany, in Bonn, and they meet to lay down a plan to prepare a blueprint for Afghanistan transition to self-sustaining and the secure government, but they fail, and then here the insurgency continues to rage, and Pakistan, who happens to be a very crucial player, being its neighbor also, so Pakistan also refuses to attend that particular meeting. So Pentagon's plan to combat missions as early as mid-2013 and shift to a primarily security assistance role in Afghanistan failed. So several incidents serve as blows to international mission, including an accidental burning of Qurans by US troops and allegations that a US soldier murdered at least 16 Afghan villagers. So here Hamid Karzai wants an apology, and that foreign troops withdrawn from village outposts and confined only to military bases in the country, which analysts say would generally accelerate the pace of transition from NATO to Afghan control. So it actually took a lot of time, because when Barack Obama announced a timetable for withdrawing most US forces from Afghanistan by the end of 2016, but they remained more or less as a plan. So sometimes they would withdraw the troop, but then the president of the country would change, and then they'll have another plan ready for the country. Meanwhile, there were elections also happening in the country. In 2014, the fresh elections happened in Afghanistan. Ashraf Ghani, he was the new elected president, and he signed a power sharing agreement with his chief opponent, Abdullah, because he had mobilized thousands of protesters as he challenged the voting results. So the agreement brokered after intensive diplomacy by US that both of them are going to share the power arrangement in the country. So now you see that again in 2014 there is a kind of civil unrest, and to avoid that there is intensive diplomacy shown by US, wherein they try to bring both the parties to work as power sharing parties. But then this disagreement continues, and there is a tussle over respective prerogatives such as appointments to important security posts. And so Taliban meanwhile is making gains in the countryside. They've always had their strong foothold in the rural areas. So wherein we see that there is civil unrest and there is no peace in the country, there is a transitional phase. So Taliban is also making a stride and also gaining in the rural areas of the country. And we all know that Afghanistan is majorly a rural country. In 2017, again, there is something big which happens, and the United States drops its most powerful non-nuclear bomb on suspected self-proclaimed Islamic State militants at a cave complex in eastern Nangarhar province. So after that bombing, which is also called as a mother of all bombs, comes as a newly elected President Donald Trump delegates decision-making authorities to the commanders. So I was telling you, earlier also, there is this constant change of president. Obviously, they're going to change the president every 4 years, but then the policy, the foreign policy matters, and their vision for the country also changes. So here, Donald Trump delegates the decision-making authority to the commanders, including the possibility of adding several thousand US troops to nearly 9,000 already deployed there. So this dreadful thing happens, and they drop a non-nuclear bomb, which was a very strong bomb in Nangarhar province, so which is obviously not taken well by the country and the Taliban as well. So bombing casts a spotlight on the emergence of Islamic State in Afghanistan. So at the same time, the Taliban appears to be as strong as ever, and the US military described the wars as stalemate. Kabul experiences suicide bombings on a large scale never seen before. While the Taliban control or contest more than a third of the country, US Marines are once again dispatched to Helmand province of Afghanistan. So differentiating his policy from Obama's, Trump says decision about withdrawal will be based on the conditions of the ground rather than arbitrary timelines. So he also invites India to play a greater role in rebuilding in Afghanistan, while castigating Pakistan for harboring insurgents in Afghanistan. So we see that this turmoil continues, and then Taliban carries out a series of bold terror attacks in Kabul, killing more than 115 people amid a broader upsurge in violence. And I'm talking about the year 2018, and continue. So they deployed. Trump administration deployed troops across rural Afghanistan to advise Afghan brigades and launching airstrikes against opium labs. They tried to decimate the Taliban finances. The administration also cuts off security assistance worth billions of dollars to Pakistan for what President Trump called its lies in deceit in harboring Taliban militants. So this change of policy also sees that there was a slowdown when it came to implementing the blueprint for withdrawal of the troops. So in 2019, there were negotiations between US and Taliban in Doha, which entered the highest level of negotiations, building on the momentum that began in the year 2018. So the talks between US Special Envoy and top Taliban official continued, and wherein US agreed that they are going to withdraw their troops from Pakistan in exchange for the Taliban pledging to block international terrorist groups from operating on Afghan soil. So Trump, he planned to pull out 7,000 troops and about half of the total US deployment. So now in September 2020, we saw that intra-Afghan peace talks begin. And representatives of the Taliban and the Afghan government and civil society made peace face to face for the first time in Doha, Qatar. This was almost after 20 years of war. So that the direct negotiations, which were delayed for months over a prisoner swap proposed in the earlier US-Taliban deal, begin after the Afghan government completes the result of 5,000 Taliban prisoners. So now, obviously, it fueled the Taliban's power, and during opening remarks, both sides expressed eagerness to bring peace to Afghanistan and establish a framework for Afghan society after US troops withdraw. Then in 2020, we see that acting US Defense Secretary Christopher C. Miller announces plans to halve the number of troops deployed in Afghanistan to 2,500 by mid-January, days before president elections of Joe Biden will be inaugurated. So Biden now decides on when he comes in power on completion of US withdrawal by 9/11. So now I am talking about the year 2021. So President Biden announces that the US will not meet the deadline set under the US-Taliban agreement to withdraw all troops by May 1 and instead releases a plan for the full withdrawal by September 11, 2021. So it's a time to end America's longest war. I'm unquoting him. He says, the remaining 3,500 troops in Afghanistan will be withdrawn regardless of whether progress is made in intra-Afghan peace talks or the Taliban reduces its attack on Afghan secure forces and citizens. So, facing little resistance, Taliban fighters overrun the capital Kabul and take over the presidential palace hours after President Ghani leaves the country. So I'm talking about 30 August 2021, when US armed forces completed their withdrawal from Afghanistan, and there were rapid advancement of the Taliban in the provinces. On 14th August, the US increased its troop commitment, but we all know that what exactly happened in the country. So the last US military forces depart Afghanistan, leaving it under Taliban rule. The exit follows a chaotic 2-week withdrawal process, during which more than 120,000 people are evacuated. The next day, President Biden says US should learn from its mistakes, that the withdrawal marks the end of an era of major military operations to remake other countries. Thousands of Afghans who assisted the US and its allies, as well as up to 200 Americans, remain in Afghanistan. US Secretary of State Anjali says Washington will work to get them out and that future US engagement in Afghanistan will focus on diplomacy. So 20-year war ends as US completes withdrawal, leaving the state in another turmoil and full of hardships. So the country feels safer or unsafe, violent or less violent. So it's definitely, seen a lot in the past, and then so many Afghans have already fled the country or have been evacuated, and their sense of fear and, their liberty being taken away. But then the recent developments are saying that Taliban is going to open up, and they are also going to encourage students or rather girls for education. But initially, when this Taliban took over the country, we could see that Taliban barred girls from school and women from work. But as soon as the things are normalizing. So many women are actually, going back to their respective works, but we do not see a very progressive state of affairs for Afghanistan soon. So thank you so much. That's all from my side. So I hope that I could explain in detail that why actually is there so much of turmoil in the country seeing the past, and especially 20th century, and why has it always been a lot of interest for countries having great power in the structural scenario of the world politics.
Thank you, ma'am. You have made us aware about Afghanistan's past, present, and also talked us something about future of Afghanistan. Now after this keynote speech, it is time for us to discuss on the topic. So I request participants to raise their questions and doubts. Please, participants.
Very good evening, Dr. Anjali, madam.
Good evening, sir.
I am Dr. Badruddin Ahmed, Professor of Management Sciences. It was very good topic to discuss at international level. Now, this is the becoming the legacy of the Americans to just, if you talk about, you have taken the contemporary Afghanistan issue, but if you also see on the Iraq-Iran issue, and if you look onto the Syrian issue, in almost all the Middle East countries, America has its own interest. Just because of some interest or the other, for its own self-gain, it has destroyed the nations. Of course, this President Biden had different philosophy, different type of political ideology, but facing to this President, even Obama also had a similar policy, and all the, especially the Bush, Bush administration, both senior Bush and good. So what made them to go for such type of criticism? They are not really, they're far away from these countries, and what made them to go for such type of involvement in other affairs? Kindly highlight on.
Sir, I would here take a stance of an international theory, the realist theory. Even the realist thinkers, those who talk about power politics, but they also say that anything which is going to cause destruction to your own country, you should not do that. The power aspiring countries also should not do that. But when we talk about the realistic objectives of these countries, and when we talk about power politics, the whole fight is about power. All these countries, no matter what, sir, and also everything, as Karl Marx has rightly put it, starts with economics.
Yes.
Yes. So when there was this Cold War going on, they were not interested in the country till the time Soviet invaded.
Yes.
So when they see the presence of Soviet Union, and then they don't want any single country to be left out from their dominance, so they go there and invited, give ammunitions and grant and aids to mujahideens, and actually fuel the ongoing conflict and the internal civil unrest in the country, which fired back upon them. And they always do it in the name of humanitarian intervention. So be it Iraq, be it Vietnam, be it Korea, we see that US will do it in the name of humanitarian intervention. And even though there is so much of destruction happening in their own country, or they're not getting so much in terms of reward, but they do not want to leave any part of the continent when it comes to their geostrategical importance. So nowadays, China is also following the same.
Yes.
Anywhere these two countries are, China will also have their stake. They're having this ambitious Belt Road initiative. I don't know where are they going to get their funds from, but then they have this huge ambitious Belt Road initiative. So what my understanding to any interference or meddling in affairs of the smaller governments is not only the political involvement, it's always involving the economic involvement. You take the example of Ukraine.
Yes, Ukraine now.
Yeah.
Russian threat is there.
Yes, Russia is there, so is America.
Yes.
Yes, because they do not want their somebody else's interest to be going, in comparison to theirs. They want to remain the superpower. They don't want any country to be challenging their own power. So I feel that the power game is there, then economic stake is there, and then also China would like in America would want to be everywhere in the name of humanitarian intervention. That is how they shield themselves from any United Nations, and also we all know that whosoever is having the veto power is having the final say in United Nations. So जो structure पे control किए हुए है is controlling the world politics.
इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि there is no as League of Nations has failed, UN also failed, and
Yes,
what
definitely.
Nehruvian philosophy of non-aligned movement. I think just all rubbish thinking.
Absolutely, there is no policy of non-alignment. Whosoever was actually, following non-alignment, went the other way, and vice versa. So those who were aligning with some country, they went to the other bloc, and vice versa. And sometimes they decided that it's not time to align with any single bloc. So let's just not have any, alliance with anyone. So let's stay non-aligned only for some time.
Yes. No, this is not the new world order in saying that. Clearly, when we think of this whole world, where we are moving towards, and in this scenario, where India stands, madam, actually, what is the role of India, how India is playing its role in this category?
As India's history, I would say that India has always played a very benevolent role when it comes to, taking stand in any such crisis. Because when we talk about India, actually India is one country wherein they actually provide humanitarian aid, where they actually provide aid in terms of infrastructure. You all would be aware that they're the ones who are actually building the parliament. And they have also maintained cultural ties with this country, even though, there were invasions, or even though there was political turmoil, anything happening in the country. That is why there's a lot of, empathy, and also this feeling of belongingness in Afghan people for India. There are a lot of refugees in Delhi area also, in Lajpat Nagar area especially. There is that sense of belonging for this country, for Bollywood. So India's role is very positive here. So they, in collaboration with other countries, are also trying to, provide some kind of economic aid, and then also trying to set up certain kind of industries there. And so we see a positive role for India, and India following its own principle of, peace and democracy will be a great neighboring help to Afghanistan, which I see in a near future.
See, आप देखिए मैडम, अभी नॉर्थ कोरिया के पास तो जाता नहीं अमेरिका. See, why they are going to other countries? Why North Korea is so many presidents have come, but they have not touched North Korea. That so small country could have a threat to the America. Why can't countries like India, or Asian countries become one bloc and have a strong, third order, so that both Russia and America couldn't interfere in the affairs of the developing nation?
Sir, I think my point here is that, when we talk about United Nations, as you yourself pointed out, that League of Nations failed, in a way United Nations failed. So when we talk about regionalism, so I think every country is looking at its own stake first, and then they will think about the region. So we are here all divided, right? Pakistan is having its own, thought process, because I'm not going to be with India or be with China if I have to counter America, because they know that they are going to face sanctions, and then they are not going to get their aid from America. So no country actually wants to stand up for any other country. They only want to stand up for that country, for example Ukraine, only if they have some vested interest in that particular country.
True. Thank you so much.
Like India is saying that we support Ukraine's independence stand. We are also okay with what Russia is doing. So Russia is appreciating India's stand because India is actually not taking any stand.
Yes,
you understand?
You are right.
With India that doesn't take any stand, so we are happy that they're respecting what we are doing. So they're totally respecting our democracy. We respect. So it's like kind of mutual admiration club. So we have to think beyond ourselves first.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else with any question or doubt, please? Thank you, Badiuddin sir, for your question. And thank you, ma'am, for explanatory answer about the questions which were raised by Honorable Dr. Badiuddin sir. Now, after this discussion session, now I would like to request Chief Organizer and Chairperson of this webinar series, Honorable Principal Dr. M. Ambedkar sir, to deliver his concluding words. Please, sir, welcome.
Thank you, Professor Kard sir. I am audible, I think. Yes. Today's
Yes, sir, yes.
today's
sir.
Professor Karad sir, Organizing Committee member, SD Misal sir, daily joining Prashant Ugade sir, supervisors of our college, Ugade sir, Utge sir, Karanje sir, Dayanand Patwari sir, and today's resource person, Dr. Anjali madam. Every day we get new from our resource persons. We touched the subject of environment, economics, law, education, technical. Few relations of our India with other countries. These topics were discussed. Today, Madam decided to speak on the Afghanistan situation, past, current, and future. Also, she gave the total story, what the crisis, the root crisis, how the development was did, and what is the current position of the Taliban here, Afghanistan. So this was the very detailed manner she explained. As a teacher of law, studied everything and given in her aspect what is analyzed the total condition of the Afghanistan. I think there should be peace forever, and there should be a good country in future also. We hope so, and there should be all and well for all citizens of the Afghanistan. You are the one of the studied teacher where you have joined here by giving detailed study of some topic. Also, you was the cultural head of the department faculty, as in introduction she have said that. So every day today we all listen this new topic. In future also, if you have any topic with you like this type, we can invite you. Thank you, madam. And please write a two pages summary of this and send to us. We will include in our book, which is going to publish on 8th March. 2-page summary of your speech. Just
Sure.
thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your concluding words and for your comments on the keynote speech. You have been motivating us smooth running of this webinar series. On behalf of organizing committee of webinar series, Shri Kumarswami College Ausa, I heartily thank you for this attempt. I also thank Honorable Dr. Anjali Sehrawat ma'am, who has accepted invitation of the college, spared her precious time, and made us aware about the condition of Afghanistan in the past, present, and future. And she delivered a detailed lecture on the topic. So, on behalf of the committee, I thank her heartily. I also thank all the participants who are joining punctually and regularly and making this webinar series interactive and successful. So thank you, participants. I also thank all organizing committee members and Dr. Anita Dhole ma'am, who has been every day introducing chief guests and keynote speakers of the webinar series. And now I request all the participants to fill feedback form so that you can have your certificates. And at the end, with the permission of chief organizer and chairperson of this webinar series, I declare here that today's webinar is over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. We keep this for 5 to 10 minutes open to fill up the feedback. You can leave and take rest.
Thank you so much, sir, for having me over. Wonderful opportunity provided by you in the college. Thank you.